Hi there, folks. This is Raina. This video is 7 sketchy things about Virgo. And I'm not specifying just the sun because the moon can produce some of these things. The moon may produce it even more readily than the sun because the moon, I do think that the moon is kind of demonstrating the shadow of a sign. But it can be Mercury, Venus, Mars, rising sign, some of those points that are very personal to a person's individual astrological pattern. And this is full disclosure, I guess you would call it. I have a moon in Virgo, so I'm compiling this list out of personal knowledge of what it's like to have a prominent Virgo in one's chart. And so anyway, number one is being hypercritical. Some people, I think pretty much all people criticize a person, place, or thing once in a while, but some people do it more than others. And Virgo is a sign that tends to be very critical. There's a book, and I haven't gotten very far into it. I think I've only gotten into the first chapter. But it's very interesting. It's called The Presence Process. And it's a program that this man developed in order to create this, I guess it's this awareness that helps people heal even, I think, but finding peace within themselves, because he talks about some of the behaviors that they do that keep them away from that peace. And the one thing that he mentioned that goes along with this is he says that people are always assessing whatever it is they're taking into their consciousness, and that creates that barrier instead of just the acceptance without needing to judge it. So just think about it. I think a lot of people, they go outside and the first thing they say is, oh, it's so cold out today. Oh, the weather is so terrible. And it's almost like you get into a kind of a train of thought that is on the negative side. And when you're judging a play that you're watching or a concert and you're deciding whether or not it's good, or a movie, it's like it keeps you from just absorbing it at a very deep level where you become at one with that experience. And so it's always keeping you apart. And so this tendency to be hypercritical can really come in between relationships, because if a person is married to somebody like this, they can feel inadequate. So if you are in that situation, tell the Virgo person how, in as much detail as you can, how this is affecting you adversely. Virgo people are not mean-spirited, at least, I would, as a sign, they're not aggressive. They just have this tendency to analyze and maybe overanalyze. And there's a good chance that they may take it under consideration. Virgo is a mutable earth sign. So they tend to be very down-to-earth, practical people, but they also are, because they're mutable, they're more flexible than, let's say, if you were to try to ask a Taurus person to change, and Taurus is a fixed sign. So you may actually have luck in getting them to see your point of view. If you're a Virgo, read that book. Maybe that'll help you. Number 2, persnickety. And I actually didn't even look up the word persnickety, even though I think I know what it means, because I use it sometimes to describe myself. It's that feeling that you have to have everything just so in order to feel comfortable, okay, what have you. So in other words, I'm the kind of person, it's like the princess and the pea, you know, if there's something that, if I'm wearing some clothing and I can kind of sort of feel the tag in my back, it becomes like this major thing and I can't concentrate and all this stuff. So it's kind of like being very exacting, wanting things just so in your life. And, you know, when you're eating something and you're seasoning it, it has to be this exact amount of heat, you know, because I like to cook, an exact amount of whatever, salt and all this stuff. And this goes back to kind of like that attention to details that Virgo's about, but it's almost like kind of exaggerating that need for attending to details. And someone might say, well, what's the big deal about that? That's not a major flaw in somebody's character. Well, most of the time it's not going to be, but let's say we're talking about the workplace. Usually, I don't think Virgo wants to be in a position of authority. You know, they don't usually aspire to that, but they may find themselves there simply because they are so efficient, and people do depend on Virgos to get the job done. So somehow they may wind up in that position. And if they have underlings, they may find it very difficult to be happy with their performance because something is a little bit off. I'm going to talk about number 3 because I think there's a real overlap, and I was even wondering if it was redundant. Number 3 is OCD, perfectionist. By the way, OCD means obsessive compulsive disorder. And, you know, I was kind of saying that tongue in cheek, but not really, because since Virgos tend to really hyper-focus on details, sometimes that can lead to OCD, where they're a little bit too concerned with every little thing. So if they're in a room and there's this spot on their wall and they're trying to wipe it off and it won't come off and they have to repaint it or something to get rid of it, a Virgo person might obsess on that to the point where they can't think of anything else. I mean, I'm obviously talking about somebody who is far gone in their Virgo-ness, but that could definitely happen, and that is OCD. Being a perfectionist. I think that being a perfectionist is one of the worst things we can do to ourselves. I'm so glad that I've kind of let that go for the most part, because it holds us back from spontaneity. And it also prevents some Virgos for even trying something new because they think they won't be good at it. And they think that they have to be good at things. Especially if you have the moon in Virgo, because the moon can represent the mother. Virgo moons may have a mother who exhibits these qualities and treats you, their child, like that. And what can happen is the mother may have, when the child was young, said, oh, you're not doing that right. You know, you're not cutting right. And that can be paralyzing. I told this story before on one of my videos, but I'm just going to say it again. I was enrolled in a program to, as a teacher, to become a teacher for early childhood, and I had to go and observe at different schools. And at one school, there was a little 5-year-old girl, and they were doing some kind of craft, and she was just sitting there with her scissors, and I was asking her why she wasn't cutting. And I think in our conversation, I got the feeling that from what she said, she was afraid of making a mistake, that she was not going to cut, within the lines or whatever. So, if that's happening that early, that somebody may have shamed her and made her feel like she was inadequate, and she didn't want to feel that way again. So Virgo people who have this perfectionistic tendency, you have to be very firm with yourself, and you have to start doing things for the sake of doing them and not trying to be perfect and sitting with the imperfection of it. I'm not talking about doing a shoddy job. It's not about that. It's about not needing there to be no flaws. And I think this is especially important with artistic projects because everyone wants to be this genius artist, and it could be in any area of creative self-expression. And working on whatever piece that you have is, of course, if you're writing a novel, revising is a good idea. But to do it so much that it just creates more paralysis and less production is something that you have to avoid. And you have to just put things out there and know that, I would change that, but I don't know how to change it. So I'm just going to accept that it's good enough. If you're dealing with a perfectionist who is a Virgo, it depends on in what context. If you work for one, good luck with that, because they may not see that they're doing anything wrong. They may, be able to justify it due to the business. But if it's really like creating problems for you, just understand at the end of the day, you have to either accept it or to leave. Number 4, high-strung, nervous. And Virgo is ruled by Mercury. So there's different things that you can say about Mercury. Mercury creates change. So the person can feel in a state of flux. But really, the main thing I think with Mercury is the influence on the emphasis on thoughts. And thoughts are what create our problems when you think about it. Because we have a tendency to identify with our thoughts and not understand that our thoughts are generated by our state of consciousness, but we can change that. And we can have different thoughts, or we can have no thoughts, or as close to no thought as possible. So Virgos have to learn how not to identify with their thoughts. And meditation is about watching your thoughts. So when you watch them, you disentangle from them. Also, Virgos have a tendency to be afraid, to be fearful about things. And this is due to thinking, what if this happens? What if this doesn't happen? And again, learning to live in the present moment and not worrying about the future. People think sometimes that worrying is a productive behavior, that it's actually irresponsible not to worry, because then it's just like you're some kind of a fool just living for today. When in fact, it's foolish to worry because A, it's not a productive activity, and B, you don't know that anything like that is going to come to pass. Why would you torture yourself before a possible difficult situation arises? It doesn't make any sense. So be here now and be happy now. Because whatever happens in the future, it could not happen at all, and meanwhile you're presently torturing yourself. Number 5, doormat. Insecurity. And, so allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. It isn't that the Virgo person is stupid and they don't know that they're being taken advantage of. They just don't stand up to them for themselves. It's interesting that Virgo and Pisces are on a polarity, because I see a lot of similarities in their behavior, well, not necessarily their behavior, but maybe their attitude, which is that they want to be selfless. They are selfless. Virgo is selfless in a more concrete way. So they may like to help people with their groceries, or they, run errands for somebody. Whereas Pisces is doing it more on the energetic level. But both are pretty humble signs, which is beautiful. However, you have to also consider yourself in the equation. So no matter what is going on, if somebody is making demands on you and it is whatever you want to call it, if it's draining you, if it's making you feel guilty if you say no, if you feel intimidated by the person, then that's the time to realize that, honor yourself and say, I'm sorry, I can't do what you're asking me to do. And not even give a reason why. Just say, I'm sorry. You don't even have to say the word no. And just make it like, that's just what it is. But a lot of times I notice when people say no or the equivalent, they leave it open. It's not really firm. But on the other hand, too, some people get angry when somebody asks them to do something because they do feel guilty. So those kind of things aren't good as well. I'm just saying, you're saying, oh no, sorry. And that's it. You don't owe them an explanation why you can't do what they want you to do. If they ask you why not, you could give it to them, but you don't have to do it right off the bat. And it's just like when you make it with a certain sense of like, this is how it is, and you're not going to change your mind. There's a confidence behind that denial that a lot of times people will respect. It's when they sound like they're on the fence that you give them an opening for them to get you to do it. By the way, that's the reason why you shouldn't give them a reason why you can't do something right off the bat, because what they'll do is they'll argue with you. If you say, no, I'm sorry, I have to pick up my son that day. And then they said, well, but what time does he get off of school? 3:00? This is going to be at 5:00. So you're going to already be home. So you're giving them an opening. And you don't owe people an explanation. Although I do think it's polite if somebody is sincere that you elaborate. I do think that. But anyway. Also, I just wanted to say, in addition to that, in personal relationships, see red flags as soon as possible. You're Virgos. You analyze things. So don't turn a blind eye if somebody's acting very dysfunctional from day one and you're not willing to admit that to yourself. Admit it to yourself and yet still be able to, go on with your life. You don't have to, there's nothing wrong with deciding not to be with somebody who's exhibiting traits that are not going to be good for you in a relationship. Okay, number 6 is being snarky. And with Virgo, like Gemini, both being ruled by Mercury, there is this mental kind of wit that they exhibit. When I say mental, I meant that there's like this verbal wordplay type of thing. A lot of Virgo people are naturally intelligent. They're very well read. They love to learn. And so there is that natural intelligence that they display through their put downs. And it can get kind of brutal because they are so precise, They know exactly what the flaws are of other people. and they can diss them really well. So if you're a Virgo, be careful about that, because you may say, oh, I'm just joking, but really it's kind of cruel. I mean, the other person knows that you know what their weaknesses are and that you're kind of exploiting them in a way. And yet it's so hard not to be snarky. I mean, I am definitely in that category. It's so hard not to be when you have a prominent Virgo. But also, I think one of the problems with this kind of an attitude is that you can become too glib. And I should have said that about Gemini, that they are too glib as one of the shadow aspects. Because I said used car salesman. That thing about being like a fast talker, being a smooth talker, and also being kind of superficial. And Virgo can get into the weeds by just being sarcastic about everything, but really it's kind of making everything superficial, kind of writing everything off, instead of like being more serious about things and entertaining these ideas, just kind of like being cynical and snarky and things like that. If you're with somebody who is a Virgo and they have a tendency to do this, let them know that you're not amused, that it bothers you. If they're a decent person, they will stop doing it. Number 7, puritanical. Okay. Virgo is a sign of the Virgin. So there's always like this kind of purity that you associate with a Virgo person just in their looks. A lot of times they can be like I mentioned the OCD, where they are, that's the other thing about OCD, is being like a germaphobe. That could definitely be a Virgo person, but also very well groomed and hygienic, you know. I think the word hygiene and Virgo go together like white on rice, right? Unless you're a Virgo and you eat brown rice, you know. But that's that puritanical streak can be not only with sex, but with their diet, you know, being a vegetarian, vegan, raw foodist. That's the perfectionism again. Feeling like, oh, you know, I'm not eating cleanly enough. But being kind of, when I was thinking of the word about puritanical, I couldn't think of the word that means uptight about talking about sex and things like that. I still can't think of that word. I actually paused this so I didn't eat up time, but the word I was looking for was prudish. I love it. And then, because I wanted to look for a synonym. Prudish, moralistic, straight-laced, stuffy, priggish, prim. That's like the poster child for Virgo, those terms. Now, Virgo, don't let it fool you, though. Virgo can be very sensual because it's an earth sign. All earth signs can love sex. But they might be the kind, if you talk about it, they will, you know, jump out of their skin because it just grosses them out. The thought of sex may gross them out. The act of sex may turn them on. So, enough said about that. Okay, you guys. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this. And if you like this kind of analysis coming from a moon in Virgo, that's what I do in my natal chart interpretations. And I also look at transits coming up in the 12-month period in your future that, you know, relate to the usual things that people are interested in. So I'm going to provide a link below if you want to check that out on my website. But anyway, thanks for watching or listening, and take care. Bye.